Hi, this is Dave from Free Run Speed. This is chapter 1 of the history of running and running shoes. If you want to know more information about what this is about, watch the first video, which is the prologue. And I'll put a link at the end of this video for it. Imagine what it was like. It's in the 1950s, and you only hear about what your competition is doing when you show up at championship races. It's 1952 at the Helsinki Olympics. A guy that you've heard about for a number of years, you've never actually seen him run or you've never seen him compete, shows up and he wins the 5,000 meters, the 10,000 meters, and just because he can, he decides, you know what, I'm gonna run the marathon. And he wins that too. His name is Emil Zatopek, and he's legendary. There's no such thing as the information superhighway. It is as slow as possible. Again, it's only at track meets or cross-country events where you find out what others have been doing. The training during this time was pretty standard around the world. Yes, there were other people doing unique things, but no one ever heard about them. Most training was done on the track. You went on the track and you ran intervals, plain and simple, every day of the week. Maybe you would take some weeks off. Mostly you'd take weeks off because you got injured. But that's what the training was. Doesn't matter if it was a marathon or a cross-country race or whatever. You were on the track running intervals. Zatopek was the ultimate in that training. It's rumored that leading up to Helsinki, he could get on the track and do 100 by 400 all under 65 seconds. With a short 150 jog between. Think about that. Just think about what it would take to do that. Their shoes on the track, of course, they strapped on track spikes. And the spikes of the day were leather spikes with, maybe they had evolved, they had a minor spike plate in them, but mostly it was a leather with a firm bottom and nails as spikes. And I know this because Adi Dassler, the founder of Adidas, was well known for building spikes. And in 1936, he built Jesse Owens' spikes that Jesse used in the Olympics. And I've had the pleasure to hold those spikes in my hand. Their training shoes on their, even though they were running on the track, sometimes they didn't wear spikes. Their training shoes were simply a leather upper, leather bottom, no midsole. So it was a case of you ran until you succeeded in the workout or you ran until you broke. And like I said, lots of runners had to take lots of time off because they broke. Stress fractures were common. 2 years after Zatopek had that amazing feat, a guy from England stood on the track, and maybe he used some of the same training that Zatopek did. The training, like I said, was all on the track. So maybe he tried to do 100 400s. I don't know. But he stood on the track and thought, I'm gonna break the 4-minute barrier in the mile. His name was Roger Bannister, and he did that. In 1960, at the Rome Olympics, so 8 years after Zatopek does what he does, 3 runners from the very small, tiny nation of New Zealand medal. I'm gonna say that again. 3 runners from the very small nation of New Zealand medal. And it turns out they weren't on the track all the time. They were doing something totally different. Their coach was Arthur Lydiard, and Lydiard had them on trails and on the beaches, running this thing called long, slow distance. One of those runners was a guy named Peter Snell. And Snell went on 4 years later in Tokyo to win 2 gold medals. The word was out. You don't have to run on the track every day. There's a different way to do it. A couple other things happened at the exact same time as right around the 1960 Olympics that are important to this discussion. Phil Knight, the guy who, with Bowerman, created Nike, graduates from University of Oregon in 1959. The training in 1959 at the University of Oregon and other places was the same: get on the track and run hard. But they see a difference in what happened at the Olympics. So coaches all over the country started looking at a different type of running. There was Bowerman. He actually went to see Lydiard in 1962. There was a guy in San Diego. His name was Bob Larsen. And he had one of the best clubs in the US, the Humul Toads. Look that one up. Larsen is famous for being the coach of Meb. But Larsen at the time is looking at his runners getting injured, his high school and his club runners getting injured all the time, and thinking there must be a better way. At the same time, Adidas and New Balance and Onitsuka Tiger are all looking at, okay, if these people aren't going to be on the track, they're going to need a different shoe. They're going to need a shoe that offers a little bit more protection. The shoes before were there to protect against the abrasive nature of the track and to give you some grip and some speed on the track. But now we're going to get on the roads and we're going to get on trails. We're going to need a different shoe. In 1959, Adidas launches the Roma. Which becomes essentially what the Vaporfly is today on a much smaller scale. It becomes the shoe. Everybody's got to have one, specifically in Europe, and it slowly worked its way into the United States. New Balance on the East Coast develops a shoe called the Trackster. And it has a rippled bottom. And they pretty much only distributed that in the New England area to the universities. 1962, Bowerman goes to see Lydiard, and Knight goes to Japan and works out a deal with Onitsuka Tiger to be the distributor in the United States. I don't think he's looking far-reaching at that point yet, but he works to become the distributor of Onitsuka Tiger running shoes, racing flats, in the United States. When Bowerman gets to New Zealand, he finds something totally different than he was thinking. First he saw the runners, the track runners that were doing this long, slow distance on the beaches and on the trails, and they'd come onto the track to do their specific work. But what he saw was regular people out running of all ages and all sizes. And he starts to think about that. And he's fascinated by it. And within 5 years of that, he writes the book that is the start of what we call the running boom. And it's a book called Jogging. And it's a way to get out the door for regular people and start a fitness program through jogging. Again, the information highway isn't out there. So it's still set up to championships, whether it's a regional championship in cross country or whether it's the Olympic Games, to really get it going. So New Balance is selling their shoes at events and at schools on the East Coast. Bowerman and his group are basically selling out of the trunk the Tiger shoes at track meets and cross country events. 1972 in Munich, all eyes are on the American runners. Prefontaine is there to win the 5,000, but what happens is this skinny guy from the US shocks the world and wins the marathon. His name was Frank Shorter, and millions of people got to watch it on their television. Shoes are developing at this time as well. First, Bowerman does a design that becomes the Cortez. They take it to Asics or Onitsuka Tiger, and Tiger builds a shoe called the Cortez. At the same time, this new little brand, Nike, that Bowerman and Knight have created, starts making their own Cortez. The year jogging comes out is the second year for Runner's World, or Running Distance News. But Runner's World and it's the year that they do their first shoe guide. So by the time Frank Shorter wins the marathon in Munich, we've got an established information hierarchy for running and running shoes. We've got Runner's World that is growing. We've got television in color that is showing major track meets, and we've got innovators at college, meaning Bowerman, or here in San Diego with Bob Larsen, who are looking at how to protect their runners or how to make their runners faster through building running shoes. And Bowerman tinkers, because these new tracks are coming out. After he's done the Cortez, then he is tinkering and looks at a waffle and says, wait a second, I can use a waffle iron. And that's where the waffle sole comes out, which the shoe, he was tinkering with his athletes, but the shoe actually came out in 1973, the waffle trainer. So remember what I said last week. Running shoes are nothing without the runners themselves. So we haven't really grown into the running boom at this point yet. It's starting to happen. The Boston Marathon has 1,000 runners running it. The New York City Marathon starts in 1970 with a few runners running Central Park. So we don't have all these mass participation events. We don't have anything that we have today. What we have is performance runners who are learning a different way to run, and they need a different product. And so that's where Bowerman and Nike and Adidas and Tiger all start to work on, and New Balance and Saucony and Brooks. Everybody starts to work on building shoes for this new kind of running. So remember, last week I talked about we don't have the Vaporfly 4% or any of these carbon fiber super shoes if we don't have Kipchoge. And it's not because Kipchoge is simply the fastest marathoner. It's because it's Kipchoge. There's something uniquely special about that one runner that created this. And obviously he didn't create it. Nike had the thought behind creating this. But it was the same back in the late 60s, early 70s. There were athletes that were special athletes that were doing special things, and they needed a different product. It wasn't marketing, it was true innovation, but it was simply to either protect those runners so that they could train more and not get injured all the time, or it was to make those runners faster. Probably more to make them faster than to protect them. We'll leave it there this week. At this point, shorter wins the marathon, and the running shoe industry is about to expand. We'll get into that next week. Hope everybody has a great week running. Thanks a lot for watching. Talk to you later.